here. You want to put something under here, sir? In the middle. Yes. Well, not now, but when I call on you.
Step out right here, sir, and then just step up to the mic.
And start, sir?
No, you don't need to talk.
Okay.
Don't make it even honest. You want to make it even cool and
Hurry up,
sexy.
so where's that?
Where's that right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So, yeah, hurry up. 10 minutes to go. You're welcome. Everybody good? Mrs. Davis Matthews? Good? Dr. Mack? She's good? The Very Reverend Canon, the Honorable Hartley Perrin, CD, Costos Rotulorum of Westmoreland. George Wright, Member of Parliament for Westmoreland Central. Councillor Bertel Moore, Mayor of Savile and Amar. Councillors, members of the Constitutional Reform Committee, distinguished guests, staff at the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Awesome. Welcome to this Constitutional Reform Town Hall meeting here in the capital city of Westmoreland, Savile and Amar. My name is Nastasia McFarlane, and it is indeed my privilege to be your Master of Ceremony for this afternoon's proceeding. Now, Jamaica is on the road to Republic. Show of hands, who knows that? Which means constitutional. Wow, a lot of hands. I love that. Awesome. Wonderful. We are on the road to Republic. Yes, that is correct. And the government of Jamaica is embarking on the most constitutional work ever in the history to transform Jamaica from a constitutional monarchy to a republic. Now, this charge is being led by the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, by the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Marlene Malahoo Fort, KCJP MP, which is to ultimately produce a new constitution of Jamaica, establishing the Republic of Jamaica, and affirming our self-determination and cultural heritage. But in order to do this, we definitely want to hear from you, the citizens of Jamaica, to hear your views on constitutional reform and the efforts that the government is making to achieve Republican status, which is the reason that we are all gathered here today. However, before we begin the discussions, please help me welcome Dr. Elaine McCarthy, Chairman of the Jamaica Umbrella Groups of Churches and a member of the Constitutional Reform Committee, to offer a word of prayer.
Just going to ask you to stand for prayer. Most righteous and eternal Father, we give you thanks once more for the opportunity to be gathered in a manner such as this. Lord, as we're about to embark on our meeting, we're asking for your guidance, your direction in everything that will be said and done. We thank you for those who have made the effort to be here. And even those who are on their way, we ask God for your guidance and protection in bringing them into this space that we are operating in this evening. Above everything else, Lord, as we share ideas and make suggestions and discuss the matter of constitutional reform, help us, God, that as a people, we will put Jamaica first and will seek for your guidance even as we seek to make this step at this time in our history. Bless the one who will be moderating and sharing. And Lord, everyone who will be participating, bless us, we pray, as we give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCarthy. Now, before we continue, let me apologize for the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Minister Malahoo Fort, who is unavoidably absent here today, but she sends her sincerest gratitude to everyone here who is joining us for the town hall meeting in the parish of her birth. Yes, she was born in Westmoreland and at her alma mater, the Mannings School. So she sends her apologies, and I'm sure she's watching online to hear the robust discussions being held on constitutional reform. As we move along on the program, we have described as the first citizen in any parish of Jamaica, the custos is to assist in maintaining the good order and discipline of any parish. And since we are in Westmoreland, I think it is only fitting that we have the custos of Westmoreland here, the very Reverend Canon, the Honorable Hartley Perrin, CD. Please make him welcome. Keep the round of applause going, ladies and gentlemen, while Mr. Perry makes his way to the stage.
Madam Moderator, for this evening's town hall meeting, when you mentioned me, I did move right away. I thought I was just being recognized. I didn't know I was coming up to give my message or greetings or remarks at this time. So this is why I was a little hesitant. Madam Moderator, distinguished persons of the platform, Mr. Member of Parliament, George Wright, distinguished sons and daughters of Westmoreland, good afternoon. This town hall meeting is not only extraordinary, but this town hall meeting is very important towards the future of this Jamaica land we love. This town hall meeting is geared towards hearing our views, deliberating and discussing on the path that we must take towards becoming a republic. There are those who will ask a question, so why should we become a republic? What is there in it for us? Perhaps my answer is that in 1962, when we became an independent country, it was fitting at that time to have moved away altogether from the monarchy. And it now has taken us 62 years and counting towards realizing what we should have been so many years ago. The fact is that when we speak about the monarchy, we're speaking about persons who enslaved us for hundreds of years. We're talking about an institution that looks in brighter favor towards those persons of a certain hue and complexion. And there's no two ways about it. It is because of this why, Madam, so many of our Jamaican men and women now are bleaching, changing their complexion, because they have lost their identity as a people and feel that the only way we can go forward is by having another hue. By changing our constitution, by recognizing that we can be proud Jamaicans, making our own decisions and charting our own course without thinking that we have to please Madam Queen in former years and now Mr. King, so that when the court of our land is to open, O ye, God save the King. And unless those words are said, the court cannot open. And when we begin to address each other in Parliament, my Lord this, and my Lord that, my lad, my Lord, all of those vestiges of our colonial past. And we have to understand that if we talk about becoming a republic, it's not an easy feat, and it is not something that can be done as easily as Barbados seem to have been able to do it. For there are complexities, there are fundamental things that affect our very being, how we live, how we move, how we relate in the world. And all of these changes will have to take place. We're talking about presidents, whether we should have a president executive or whether we should have otherwise. All of these matters have to be resolved. And I'm happy that when we first were made independent, many of us never had a say. But now that we are thinking about this new dispensation, it allows us to have a voice. And therefore, it's unfortunate that there are so many chairs without persons sitting in them this afternoon, because it is imperative that every Jamaican living in Jamaica or living outside of Jamaica recognizes the importance and the significance of becoming a republic and to have their voices heard. And not just heard, but the firm and important suggestions that may be made, that these are taken on board, because we are looking not just for today, but we are looking towards the future. And so I'm happy to have had this opportunity to be here with us this afternoon on this historic moment when we start the journey of becoming a republic. We have spoken about it for so many years, but it does seem as if being a republic is not so far off anymore. But at the same time, I warn us that we are to still take time to recognize all the implications inherent in that action and continue to pray that Jamaica, land we love, we will have knowledge, we'll have wisdom, we'll have vision, so that truly Jamaica will be a place where we can live, work, and do our business. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Costos. Now we will hear from the Member of Parliament of Westmoreland Central, George Wright. Please make him welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, let me acknowledge the presence of the Costos, the Reverend Canon Hartley D. Perrin, Costos Remarks of Westmoreland, Mr. David Henry, member of the Constitutional Reform Committee, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant afternoon. Pleasant afternoon. All right, so sorry that we don't have more persons in here to get involved, but as we are here this afternoon for a very reasonable cause. We're talking about the constitutional reform. And I would love for each and every one to participate in this constitutional reform. As dear Costos relates to us, that we have come a long way and we have gained independence 60 years ago, and we still under the king's regime. But what I really want this afternoon is that we have to discuss matters and look at the changes that will have to be made to reform our constitution so that Jamaica can become a republic. We acknowledge that every voice matters. We are encouraging you to participate as Jamaica make the first step, its greatest journey that you all are coming. But I want to say something here this afternoon, that this won't be benefiting just an individual, but to make such a move, it will benefit the entire Jamaica. So I want all of us who are here this afternoon and those who are on their way coming to come on down and participate, that we can have a meaningful understanding about this restructuring the constitutional reform here this afternoon. I thank you.
Thank you so much, MP Wright. Now, the Constitutional Reform Committee is to assist in providing expert guidance and oversight to the government and people of Jamaica during the constitutional reform process to, among other things, implement the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform of 1995, on which are still applicable in our society today, while helping to reach an agreement where non-existent on other related matters. Today with us, we have 3 members of the Constitutional Reform Committee. We have Dr. David Henry, representing the wider society faith-based. We have Mrs. Lalita Davis-Mattis, CD, JP, the National Council on Reparations, and we have Dr. Elaine McCarthy, Chairman of the Jamaica Umbrella Groups of Churches. Please give them a round of applause, everyone. So to provide an overview on the constitutional reform process and the work of the committee, please help me welcome Mr. David Henry.
Thank you, Anastasia. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Maybe we could try that again. Good evening. I want to just join in expressing thanks for each of you coming out to share in this town hall meeting. And today, as we have indicated, we'll be sharing about constitutional reform, which in my opinion is perhaps one of the most important issues to be addressed in our nation since our independence back in 1962. Because constitutional matters impacts all of us very deeply and profoundly. And at this meeting, we want to share with you regarding what is proposed for constitutional reform, and we want to, more significantly, invite your feedback, your suggestions, your comments, and recommendation. The Constitution of Jamaica is the supreme law of our nation. It speaks to how we are governed. It speaks to the arms of our government, the executive, that's the cabinet, and the ministers of government who are responsible for running the country, so to speak. The legislature, which comprises members of parliament, senators responsible for making laws, and the judiciary responsible for interpreting our laws. The Constitution also speaks to other important institutions in our nation and outlines fundamental rights and freedoms of us as citizens of Jamaica, and that's called the Charter of Rights. The Constitutional Reform Committee was appointed in February of this year, and we had our first meeting on March 22 of this year. And the committee is comprised of representatives from the government of Jamaica, the opposition, and wider society, including the church and other civil society organizations. And our mandate really is to facilitate a process, the process of constitutional reform, because at the end of the day, it is us as Jamaicans who will need to determine how it is we want our constitution to flow. And this exercise, as has been indicated already, is a continuation of our process, which started way back in the 70s, actually. It was advanced in the 90s when a joint select committee of the Houses of Parliament on constitutional electoral reform met over a period of years and submitted recommendations for constitutional reform back in 1995. The late Justice James Carr headed that committee. However, the only significant recommendations for constitutional reform which has been implemented since that report has been the Charter of Rights, which was implemented in 2011. The Constitutional Reform Committee, we have had about 17 meetings so far. We have been publishing our minutes on the ministry's website. We'll tell you where that is so you can get more information. And we have invited and encouraged individuals and groups to make written and oral presentations to the committee. And we have heard quite a number of submissions expressing a range of views. Submissions have included a question, for example, as to the use of language in our Constitution on the premise that our Constitution should really be simplified and be in language that is understandable to all Jamaicans from all walks of life, in light of the fact that our heart language is in fact patois. Submissions have also been shared and received from various civil society organizations and individuals, and consultations have been had with justices of the peace, the JDF church leaders, youth groups, and other organizations. And we have had what we call stakeholder meetings and town hall meetings in different parishes. We have been to Montego Bay, we have been to Mandeville, Port Antonio, we have been to St. Bess, and now we are in Westmoreland, and we are very, very happy to be here. The timetable which was set for the completion of the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee has been revised, and although no firm date has been set for completing the work, a process has been agreed by which the committee has agreed that the process should include significant public education. One of the things that we lament is that we no longer teach civics in school, and so many persons don't even understand what the Constitution is and how the government is arranged and so on. And we also are embarking on extensive consultations as a prelude to us making recommendations to the minister and through her to the cabinet to inform the preparation of a bill to be laid in Parliament for constitutional reform. What are the areas that we are prioritizing for reform at this stage? One, we want to prioritize substituting what we call the monarchical form of government, by which King Charles III is King of Jamaica. Did you know this? He's King of Jamaica. We want to substitute that to a republican form of government. And a republic simply means sovereignty of the people, government of the people, by the people. We also want to Jamaicanize the Constitution of Jamaica by having our Constitution enacted or passed in Jamaica, rather than as it now exists as an order in council made by the British monarch in Buckingham Palace. So although we were responsible for drafting our Constitution, we had to go to England, and it was passed through Buckingham Palace. And for these reforms to be made, it required the approval of the electorate in what is called a referendum. A bill has to be laid on the table of the House of Parliament. We call that sometimes called the lower house. For a period of 3 months, it needs to be debated. And a 2/3 majority of that house will need to pass the bill, after which it will have to be laid in the Senate, the upper house, and another 3-month period for debate, and a 2/3 majority of that house needs to approve it. After which, a referendum will have to be called and an appropriate question put to the electorate whether it supports or rejects the bill for constitutional reform. It's therefore important for each and every one of us to be registered to vote. If you're not enumerated, you can't participate. A significant issue raised by a number of commentators is whether Jamaica should adopt what is called a presidential system of government, such, for example, as exists in the United States of America. Now, this move would represent a really radical change in how we are governed, and both political parties would need to support such a change. The view of the Constitutional Reform Committee, however, as presently advised, we are not persuaded that this is either desirable, workable, and in the best interest of Jamaica. Having regard to the example of other nations, our own experience in governance for now 61 years since independence, the committee favors the retention of what we call a parliamentary democracy, a cabinet system. And under this system, a president may be appointed as head of state, and we would have a prime minister as head of government. The committee has commenced consideration whether, having regard to the costs of maintaining a formal head of state or a president, whether it is necessary or desirable to retain such an office. The CRC is of the view that if the office of president is to be established, the person who holds that office and function should be clearly specified, and it should be distinct from the office of the prime minister. And so you will see on the agenda today, I want to talk about how do you think we should select a president? One of the proposals that person should be nominated by the prime minister in consultation with the leader of the opposition and confirmed by what is called an affirmative resolution of parliament, with both houses sitting together with a vote of 2/3 majority of all members. Some persons, however, have advocated for direct election of president. I've heard people say, I want to elect my president directly. I don't want to go through parliament. And then also in our constitution, if we are going to be modifying things and moving forward, any reference to any country other than Jamaica in the constitution should be as a foreign country. As such, there would be the removal from the Constitution of any reference to what is called Commonwealth. Right now, Commonwealth citizens, broadly defined, can vote, and so on. And any privilege attached to Jamaicans' relationship with the Commonwealth would have to change. Quickly, just to indicate some other important proposals that we may want to consider and address. One of them is the entrenchment of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica as a part of our Constitution. That's one of the things that over the last number of years, Jamaica has done well. We have sorted out how we have done elections. And we may want to entrench the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Should there be term limits for parliamentarians? That's another consideration. Should there be fixed election dates? Should there be impeachment of public officials? Should there be recall elections of parliamentarians? Suppose a parliamentarian misbehaves. Should they be able to vote and say, come back? Should there be removal of qualification for parliamentary seats of Commonwealth citizens who are not Jamaican citizens? One of the big issues we need to recognize the diaspora, those who don't live here, but they are very interested in what's happening here. How do we deal with the diaspora? And one issue that has arisen as well is, should we entrench the Integrity Commission as a part of our Constitution? So today we invite your questions, we invite your thoughts, your feedback, and your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry. Now, we are about to start the discussions, but before we start the discussion, I'm just going to remind everyone that we are streaming online. We are streaming on the ministry's Facebook and YouTube pages at MLCA GOVJM, that's Facebook and YouTube, and we're also streaming on the Jamaica Information Services pages. On Facebook, it is at JIS Voice, VOICE, that's JIS Voice, and on YouTube, it is at Watch JIS. So, we have a microphone in the center of the room for any person here who would like to ask a question, voice a concern regarding the constitutional reform efforts. The floor is open. The microphone is on. The members are ready to answer any question, concern that anyone may have. So we open the floor to you. In the meantime, while we allow persons to go to the microphone, the issues that are being discussed in phase 1 of the constitutional reform process are as follows: the abolition of the constitutional monarchy, the creation of the office of the President of the Republic of Jamaica, qualifications of the President, the selection process of the President, terms of office of the President, and the powers that the President will have as the head of state of Jamaica. Mrs. Davis-Mattis, would you like to just give us some context as it regards to the abolition of the constitutional monarchy and the creation of the President of the Republic of Jamaica?
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me say, I'm happy to be here for many reasons apart from being on the committee, but this is my town, Savannah Lamar, this is my school, this is my auditorium, and my sister and my nephew are sitting over there. Okay, so as David has said, right, there's a discussion going on about Jamaicanizing the Constitution, right? Many of us perhaps have never seen the constitutional document, which is quite a large enough document, right? And many of us have never really read it. Those of us who are older perhaps did civics in school back in the day. And in those days, the civics book told you about the government and it told you who the ministers were. At that time, the ministers were consistent. So you could learn in school that the Minister of Education was X, and that person would be the minister for a while. So why are we doing what we're doing? So, for example, Reverend Perrin spoke to the fact that since independence, we are really still under a constitution that was passed by the British monarch. So what's the significance of that? Okay, we hear the word constitution, order, and council. The fact is that an order, in terms of the hierarchy of laws, is the lowest, one of the lowest on the rung. So basically, our constitution, from the UK, the British perspective, the monarchy, was not even one of the more important documents at the time. So that's one. So we want to make sure that we can pass a constitution that we say is Jamaican. It was passed by the Parliament and the people of Jamaica. So there are different processes that have been established, and Minister Malahoo Ford has articulated a three-pronged process. And the first process is to address those areas of the Constitution that are the more difficult to address. And people ask us, why are we going this route? Why do you need a referendum? Why do you need people to go out to the polls and vote? Because that's what we'll all have to do. We'll all have to go behind the ballot, the ballot station, take a ballot paper and vote whether or not we want to get rid of the king. It cannot happen any other way. Why? Because the same Constitution prescribes in great detail how we change the Constitution. And of course, that makes sense. Because you can't have an instrument that represents the greatest governance and legislative framework that anybody can get up and change. So the Constitution prescribes that process. So in order to become a republic and to get rid of the king, we have to do it by referendum. And David explained. What does that mean? It means that the people at the end of the day have to approve it. So no matter what we do up here, no matter what the parliament does, no matter what your MP does and feels about it, the people have to go and say, yes, we believe it's time to move away from the king. Okay, so what's the big deal about moving away from the king? The truth of the matter is, in 2023, King Charles is the king of Jamaica. So, in other words, so we have a king, and okay, the king lives in Britain, but for all intents and purposes, King Charles is the king of Jamaica. So do we still want a king of Jamaica? When we go to court, we still say, God save the king. Why? Because the king is the king of Jamaica. And the Governor General is merely the representative of the king. In fact, all of us in here who pay taxes are paying for the Governor General's salary, as well as the people in the Governor General's department. Because the British are not contributing anything. No. Are we going to get rid of the entire Constitution? The answer is no. Why? Because over time, we have made amendments to the Constitution. For example, we have a new Bill of Rights section that gives us rights that we never had before. For example, we have rights to a healthy environment. We never had that before. So over time, as Jamaicans, we have ensured that the Constitution itself has evolved to represent what we want. So here is another process where we want to, yes, look at the Constitution and to determine what are those elements that have served us well as a people, and what are those elements that we need to change. And one of the fundamental areas is to say, let us become a republic. Now, what's a republic? So, okay, if you have a new constitution tomorrow, this is it. What does that mean? The notion of a republic suggests, and not more than suggests, the notion of a republic dictates that the people are the sovereign as opposed to the king. So if the people are sovereign, then this process that we're engaging in is a process where the people who are to be sovereign must dictate what goes into that process. So these consultations that we're having are being documented. The recommendations from the public are being documented. They have to be considered. The committee does not make decisions. The committee makes recommendations. It goes through Minister Malahoo Fort, who happens to be the chair, as well as Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. It goes to the cabinet. It will end up having to go to Parliament. And it's a long process. Parliament can't get up tomorrow and say, okay, yes, we like this. Right? There is a long process, and at the end of the day, every Jamaican who is enumerated has to or should go and decide if we want to be a republic and if we want to get rid of the king. No. So to get rid of the king, and it might sound bad when you say get rid of. Okay, to dispense with the king. What do you replace that with? So there's a notion of a president. And if you have a president, what is the president going to do? So we have an idea of what the Governor General does now. And by the way, the role of the Governor General has also evolved over time. So what the Governor General was doing in 1962, his role has also evolved over time. So what is it that we want if we have a president? Is it that when we vote to dispense with the monarch and we put in a president, that he or she will assume the same roles and responsibilities of the current Governor General? Is that what you want? Is that what we want? We have to think about it. This process has nothing to do with green and orange or blue, you know. Nothing. This is not a partisan political process. This is a process where the people of this country, regardless of our affiliation, come together and say, this is what we want as our governing instrument. Remember, your constitution is supreme, and any law passed has to be in accordance with the Constitution. So you can't have a constitution and then you have laws that are in contravention of the constitution. So it's a very important process. And the process cannot be left up to those of us who people think are perhaps more intelligent. That's not what it is. This process is for everybody, from the coconut vendor to the woman who sells the mango. It is a process that we must engage with, and those of us who understand more must take the responsibility to pass on the information. And I want to say our political representatives are very important to the process, because our politics dictate that people follow our politicians. So whilst it's not a political process, we have to understand the role of our community members, the justices of the peace. You have a role to play. We all have different roles to play. Community leaders. This morning we had a meeting in the grill with a small group of stakeholders. But the stakeholder group actually included persons from literally different walks of life. Whether it was the person who was representing a community group, whether it was a hotelier, but the representation of the people must be there, or else this process is going to be another process where somebody dictates to you. And I want to add this. When we started this process years ago with the other constitutional reform committees, many people could not read. Today, most of us can read, but we still don't read. And we depend on others to interpret for us. This is a time when we must all try to figure out, what is this constitution that holds my rights? That's what the document is, you know. This is the document that embodies all of our rights. This is the document that dictates when the policeman stops you what he can do or cannot do. This is the document. So what I'm saying is, it must be a very involved process, and I'm going to stop talking now, so that you can all go to the microphone and ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Davis-Mattis. Well said. Now, we speak about having a president as the head of state of the Republic of Jamaica. Now, I'm going to ask Dr. Henry to take this question, and we talk about having an executive president and a non-executive president. For the persons who are not familiar with the lingo of the presidency, could you just please explain to them what an executive president is and a non-executive president?
Perhaps the simplest way of explaining an executive president is to think of what happens in the United States and their presidential system. What we are proposing, and in fact what the former commission proposed, is that we have a president who would not be like that. You know, executive president, and has a wide range of powers, but he would have certain executive powers which are limited, and those would include matters such as making certain important appointments in our country, appointments of our Chief Justice, our President of our Court of Appeal, those who serve on the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, those who are the independent members of the commission, those who serve on various services commission, and in other areas as well. So those are some of the areas we are looking at and are discussing as to whether those should be the kinds of responsibility of our president. Now, as Ladita said earlier on, already in terms of the Governor General's role in Jamaica, he has taken on far greater functions in the running of our country than what was the established position back in 1962. And so, for example, he would be responsible for appointing persons to the Integrity Commission. And so that also could be one of the areas in which the president may be responsible for making appointments, in addition to the other general roles, you know, let's call them ceremonial roles, right? That is what we are talking about in terms of a president. And this is subject to your feedback, your own thoughts, and so on. And then also we have to answer the question which has arisen: how you choose him? Who decides who the president should be? Some people say, we want to elect our president. There's a view that says the parliament, a 2/3 majority of both houses of parliament sitting together, There's a nomination and a consultation, a nomination by the Prime Minister, a consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, and an affirmative resolution. In other words, both houses sitting together would vote, and there should be a 2/3 vote. That is one approach. Would love to hear your feedback on that, or your thoughts.
Hello, sir. Please introduce yourself and then you state your question.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dwayne Vaz, former Member of Parliament for Westmoreland Central. Just a simple question. I'm asking you to answer it in the simplest terms. I think I started to answer the question that I was about to ask. It's just to explain what is the real difference in the simplest terms between the President and the Governor General with regards to the roles and responsibilities. Because I think people need to understand the logic behind the changing the position. A lot of people don't understand what will be the difference in the roles of each person.
Okay, so first of all, the Governor General represents the Queen, and therefore there is executive power in the...
Well, now
not
it's the King.
Not the Queen, the King.
The King.
Right? The King, right? And so that in itself would be a fundamental change. But in addition, one of the ways that the committee has been looking at it, I'm talking about the previous commission, was that we need someone who all Jamaicans can look up to as kind of like an impartial umpire. Now, nobody is impartial, right? But we have had the benefit over the years in terms of even our Governor Generals or Governors General of persons who have Sir Howard Cook, Sir Clifford Campbell, different ones who, notwithstanding their party positions prior, have been the kinds of persons who you could look up to as impartial. And so there's the idea then is we want to retain something like that. And that happens in a number of countries across the world, like in Italy and Germany, there's a president. Even in France, there's a president and there's a prime minister. So we are looking at that as a potential model. And those functions that I have indicated earlier in terms of maybe making appointments to key areas so that it is removed from the political wranglings of appointments and so on, but that those appointments would be made maybe through the President. Have I answered your question?
To some extent. Okay. A follow-up question though.
Sure.
With regards to the structure would have been the Governor General. You have the Costos who would represent the Governor General at the parish level. Then you have, of course, the Justices of Peace. So I'm trying to figure out now, with a president instead of a Governor General, what will happen now to those particular positions and how will they be included in the new system that we're having? So
the need for persons playing those roles of Costos and also playing the roles of Justices of the Peace will still exist. We would maybe need to change the names of those kinds of roles, but the role itself, the substance of the role would still exist, and we would simply be changing those titles and names for those roles, but those roles would still exist in our society.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much. You can take the microphone, sir. Introduce yourself, and then you can state your question.
I'm Carlton Wilson. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wilson.
I just wanted to ask, because one of the challenges I have is that, one, for constitutional reform, I wondered if we should, as a nation, should look at what is it we really want of our society. And so the question that I want to ask is, what value system is underpinning this kind of reform? Because we are looking at not just a president, but a new image of a nation. And if we are going to develop a new image and personality of a nation, what kind of a direction do we want as a people? How are we going to fit this constitutional reform in providing us with a clear vision and understanding as to how we are going to get where we want to be as a nation?
Could you repeat your name, sir?
Mr. Wilson.
Carlton Wilson.
Mr. Wilson, I believe that what you have shared is very important, because a constitution really doesn't exist as a document by itself. It must rest on some foundation. And that foundation, I believe, must be the values of us as a people. And hence even why we are having these conversations, because we are asking us as Jamaican people to say, what is it that we value? What are the things that have worked for us? What are the things that have not worked for us? What are the things that we need to change? And we are saying, based on those values, we want to shape a constitution to reflect and advance the aspirations of Jamaicans and what is in the best interest of our country and our people. So I'm supporting you on that, and we need that's part of the conversation. We need to talk about those kinds of values. And so, for example, our Charter of Rights, which now exists, since 2011, I would want to commend each of us to have a look at it, because it speaks to values as to how we value people, how we value the environment, how we value our relationships in community, and so on. These are important values that have shaped our constitution, and we may want to say, are there other things we want to include? So, for example, I had mentioned earlier on the issue of language, and a group from the university came and spoke to us about L-A-N-G-I, they spell it language, L-A-W-I-G, L-A-N-W-I-G, language. But their point was this, that it is if patois is the heart language of Jamaica, should we, for example, as some kind of right of our citizens, say that we acknowledge and recognize this as our language? Do you understand what I'm saying? And therefore, patois then is elevated to where it ought to be and should not be treated as something, negative, but it should be affirmed. So I'm just using that as an example of maybe something we want to say, this is something we value for us as a people, and we may want to include that in our constitutional arrangements.
If I might just add, even as we are moving towards this new construct in our nation, we will have to seriously look at what will the roles and the functions of this president be. Then we also have to put in place some amount of accountability, so that this person who is occupying this position will not just be there and do as he or she pleases, but there is some level of accountability and assessment that will be done. And also the mechanism in place to ensure that this is carried out. So even as we move forward, these are some of the things that we have to put in place, because in the past we do have accountability measures for various offices. The thing is whether or not the implementation or ensuring that these are carried out, and if not, the consequences that are applied. So we have to have a new rethink of how we look at governance, and as a people, how we really participate in the process.
You may recall,
I just want to...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just add to what you just said. So in other words, I see the process as an ongoing process. So there's a three-phase process, right? So the first process I said before is to determine if we still want a king, and if we want to be a republican, what does that mean? And what does it mean when you say the people are sovereign? Because you can't write in a document that the people are sovereign and we operate the same way. And by the way, one of the fundamental issues in the reform, especially as it relates to the notion of the president and governance, is one of accountability. So when you put in these positions, how are they accountable to us? And the other construct is, how are we accountable to each other? So some constitutions have provisions that relate to citizen responsibility. In other words, under the Constitution, what are your roles and responsibilities? Under the Constitution, apart from your rights and the processes, what is the role of the state to you? Because remember, even in terms of constitutional rights, I know something that's not to the RM court about, right? So I'm saying, we have to develop a process, and the issue regarding the value system now, a lot of issues have arisen since we started our work. A lot of rights issues. So a lot of rights that were perhaps latent are now active. and persons are coming forward and saying, I want you to think about these rights. I want to think about land rights. What would that mean? People talk about beach access. What would that mean? No. Some of these matters are not necessarily for the Constitution, you know. And by the way, some of these matters are matters because all of us have sat down on our laurels and have allowed things to progress. And then when it gets bad, we burn tire and hope that the media will come out. So I'm saying this must be a process that we take responsibility for. And this is about the generations to come. So the issue you ask about the value system, what is it that we're trying to do? What should a Jamaican look like in the next 50 years? So if you have a child in school who is now 10 years old, in the next 40 years, what should that Jamaican look like? And therefore, it's a process that has to begin from pre-primary when we talk about how we deal with constitutional reform, what are our rights and responsibilities. We are not a country that we obey rules, that's a fact. So in other words, is putting it in the Constitution going to change us? No, because what you're going to have is a lovely document that has all these wonderful rights, all these wonderful statements, and we are still at the stage where we have not moved. So this process, being as engaging as it is, we want to consider all of this, and that is why the minister actually, in her sectoral speech, called upon the two parties to agree to continue the process. Because when she outlined the initial timelines were designed, you know, that the process, at least the people of Jamaica, would have the opportunity to determine whether or not we want to dispense with the monarch before elections. Because, as I said, this is not a matter that should be mixed up with general elections. And so there was a thinking behind the original timelines so that we could have gone through the public consultation process, etc. But I think we have thought about it, this committee from day one, thought it necessary and important that the country be engaged in a way. Because we're having a conversation and we don't know what we're having a conversation about. We're talking about changing a president that's doing, so what is the difference? Okay, we may look at the Barbados model, yes, they went republic, but is there a difference? Jamaicans are calling for a difference. Jamaicans are calling for a new governance framework. Jamaicans are saying, we have had presentations, people are saying, when you go to the polls in a general election, you should vote for the MP, you should vote for the Prime Minister separately. People are saying you must vote for the ministers of government as well. So the conversations are engaging and also encouraging because it says that Jamaicans are engaged and we want Jamaicans to be engaged even further. But the discussions are going on, and at the end of the day, this morning we had a discussion about the role of the church, role of church and state. So people are actually thinking, you know, there are many symbols that will have to change. Many symbols, there are many forms that will have to change. I look at the policeman's, the inspector's outfit this morning, his buttons have the crown on it. The uniform will have to change. You can't wear the button with the crown anymore. Because the king is no longer king of Jamaica. So in other words, it's an involved process that will go over time. And I believe, as the minister has called for, there has to be a commitment on the part of the political parties to continue the process for the benefit of Jamaicans. And when we engage, we must engage and think about those children who are not yet born. Right? Many of us are distressed about Jamaica at this stage. And the question is, what do we want? We are the elders. We are the people who the next generations are going to ask. In 2023, what were we doing? You know, who went to the consultation? Did we care? And so that's what I'm saying. This is a very important process. So whilst we change the governance framework, it must work. And we must ask ourselves, what next? If we say we want fixed election dates, if we say we want fixed term elections, you must ask yourself, what next? What if when you have fixed elections, there is no alternative? So in other words, we have to look at our own maturity as a country, our own cultural and political maturity. And whilst we're not making decisions for today, we have to think about all these things. It has to work. Because when we do this, we're not doing it again. We're talking about 1962. This is 2023. We're not going to do it again, at least not for now.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Davis-Mattis. Now we have here in the first phase the selection process of the president. And I know Dr. Henry spoke about it earlier about persons wanting to vote in their president as their head of state versus other persons who think that the president should be appointed. Now, Dr. Henry, talk about the scope of the Constitutional Reform Committee in terms of the discussions of the selection process of the president.
Well, the committee basically is looking at the recommendations that come to us, and what we are charged to do is to facilitate that conversation and then together make recommendations. The scope of our role really is to make recommendations to the minister, and the minister will make recommendations to the cabinet. There is a chief parliamentary council, and there's an office that's responsible for drafting relevant bills. We don't do that, but we make recommendations through the minister to the cabinet.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry. So I heard Mrs. Davis-Mattis mention about a conversation earlier today about the church and the state. Now, Dr. Elaine McCarthy, you are the chairman of Jamaica Umbrella Groups of Churches. Talk to us a little bit more about the involvement of the church so far on the constitutional process from the standpoint of the Constitutional Reform Committee.
Thank you very much. All right, what we have been doing is engaging as much as possible our constituents, the church groups, and this is by way of hosting meetings such as these. We have had several such meetings, and there are still others to come, because we recognize that everybody needs to know what is happening as it relates to the constitution reform. What we have found is that when we bring our members into these meetings, they have the opportunity to be able to ask questions, get clarifications, and leave with a better understanding of what the process is about. There are still many more groups to reach, and so we are moving forward in that direction.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCarthy. And I know that there... Go ahead, no problem.
I hope you don't think I'm chatting too much, right? But let me say this as well. The church in Jamaica, regardless of the denomination, is an important space. And if we believe, right now, whether you go to church or not, if those of us who go to church believe that this country is blessed, when a hurricane comes in, we pray. And we ask the Lord to turn it away, and we thank God after that. If we as a people believe that church is important, our national anthem is a prayer. The national anthem is a prayer. So if we as a people believe that this country is a blessed country, then this process cannot be divorced from the church. That's what I'm saying. It cannot be a separate process from the church. Because your rights in church, yes, that's the kingdom, but your rights as a citizen translate to that as well. So the role of the church is very important. And I think when the minister added the church, and we have been having many meetings with churches, it's a very important process that we must engage. So we have to get to the point where we stop, for this purpose, we stop separating what we may decide to be the secular and the spiritual. Because this is about Jamaica. This is about the future of a country and the future of a people who are not yet here. And that we have that opportunity. We have that opportunity, all of us sitting in here when we go home, to determine the future of people who are not here. That's an awesome responsibility. And I'm saying the church must also be involved in that process.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Davis-Mattis. Yes, sir, you can go to the microphone, state your name, and then you can state your question. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Gary Spence. I just hear here talking about church. Church is just a building. Are you talking about religion? Because when you talk about church, it's just a set of people, but religion is a wide base. Because we have religious people, we have Muslims, we have all type of people. Are they being communicated to? Are only the people within church?
No, so basically our constitution now gives us freedom of religion. So that includes everybody. But the question that was asked within the context of church. Okay. So I answered the question in the context of church. Okay. So in terms of religions, yes, wherever we are, whichever space we are in, we have a responsibility. We are making decisions on behalf of people who are not yet here. Okay. We are using our own value systems to make those determinations. So if, in other words, if we were to come up with a large strategic plan for Jamaica, what would it be? What do we want to see? I mean, Reverend Perrin talked about Vision 2030, where this is the country in which you are supposed to live and move and have your being. All of us who are in foreign should be coming home, because this is the place that you want to live. So this must be a part of that process.
My argument is, Miss, I'm not a Christian. I'm a believer in the Creator.
Yeah.
All right? Me, not being a Christian, but a believer in the Creator. Are you saying that the church, when you consult the church and whatever they say, it is what is law?
Okay, no.
Yeah.
No, we're not saying that. And,
all right.
and if I could just jump in here. I think just going back to that question that gentleman asked earlier about our values. One of the values of Jamaica is freedom of religion, which means you can be a part of the Christian church, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Rastafari, you can be whatever you choose to be, as long as you're not harming anybody, right? But the Constitution already recognizes that and affirms freedom of religion as a value in our nation.
No, but yeah, we are talking about constitutional reform, isn't it?
Sorry?
We are talking about constitutional reform.
Right.
And with constitutional reform, this will come up.
I think this is one of the areas that will remain. In other words, it already exists, freedom of religion, as a part of our constitutional arrangement, and it will continue, in my opinion. That would be definitely what I'd be voting for.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. And next question. When it comes to land.
Land?
Yeah. Who will be, we will move in from the king to a president.
Yes.
What will happen to the crown land now?
What will happen to the ground land?
Yeah, the crown.
The crown land?
Yeah.
The Commissioner of Lands basically owns all those properties that are described as crown lands. So there's a Commissioner of Lands, and those lands are vested in the Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
And just to
Yes.
add something as it relates to speaking about the religion and the various groups. In the drive that we are having to educate persons as much as possible, we'll be reaching right across all various religious groups. So it's a process, all right? But all groups will be included. Already we have persons from the Rastafarian group who have been included and who have been participating. So no group will be barred. And if you have a particular group or a part of a particular group, the gentleman that spoke a while ago, right, and you want for us to meet with that group and have a discussion, then that can be arranged. So you can just let us know. All right? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. McCarthy. Now, I just want to state that it's not just the religious groups that the Constitutional Reform Committee have been meeting with. We have been meeting with civil society groups as well. We have been talking to youth groups as well. We also have a youth advocate on the Constitutional Reform Committee, and we also have members within the government, the opposition. So we are going across the island to talk to different representatives of different groups to make sure that their voices are heard as well, their perspectives are heard, so that we can have a greater and comprehensive understanding of where we want to go in Jamaica's road to republic. Yes, sir, you have a question. Please state your name and also go ahead and state your question.
Akwaba, Xavier Yestelen. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, may God give you good health. I am Haile Mikhail Kojo, many things to many people, including being parliamentary caretaker for Westmoreland Eastern and author of We the People Proposed Constitution of Republic Jamaica, which yesterday celebrated its second anniversary, July 26, 2023. Once again, I congratulate the Constitutional Reform Committee for discussing it with me at Jamaica House on July 14 this year, which caused me to make a 14th revision to include a notary's court within each parish court, and also to push back the date to October 21, 2024. My duty is to write this document, to advertise it, and to advocate for its implementation, because it can deliver good governance. You all may get a copy by sending a WhatsApp message to 1-876-225-1163. Once again, I say, what we need is to throw out the 1962 document that has caused us many problems and implement a document such as this. It can deliver good governance. Citizens of Westmoreland who are here, please raise your hand if you have had a copy and read it. Nobody here have had a copy and read it? You read it? All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Those
Kojo.
of you who were at the Costos Town Hall meeting on June 13, could you raise your hand if you were at that meeting?
Thank you very much, Kojo. This gentleman has been to about 4 town hall meetings.
In closing,
and he has shared concerning the Constitution and has also
the reason why I ask
shared.
these questions is I don't want to overlap. If they were here and they heard, then they wouldn't have to hear me
Right.
again. So, in closing, I'd like to tell you that this document still has meaning, and we are looking forward to the Constitutional Reform Committee to implement things that are in it. It can deliver good governance. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Haile Mikhail Kojo. Yes, sir, you have a question. Please state your name and then state your question.
Yes, I am McKinney Brown. I'm a part of the Secretariat of the CRC. We have a question from YouTube.
Yes.
Why do we have to have a referendum?
Okay.
We have to have a referendum because the Constitution as it exists prescribes that to remove the monarchy, that is what is required. So it requires Parliament, lower house, 2/3 majority, Senate, 2/3, but also that it has to go to the people to vote on it. This is unlike what happened in Barbados. Their constitutional arrangements were different from ours, and they were able to do it as a parliament. But in Jamaica, not only would the parliament have to pass it by a 2/3 majority, but the Constitution requires that we go to a referendum and invite the people to approve it. So in a real sense, this is one opportunity where every Jamaican can make law. Because otherwise, it's the legislature that does it, right? But this is an opportunity now for all of Jamaicans to make law.
And just to remind you too, that it is important that you ensure that your voter's ID is up to date and current. So try to have that done before September or by September, because as we were reminded today, it's every 6 months that you have this updating done. And if an election is called and your voter's ID is not up to date, you won't have a chance to vote, okay?
Thank you so much, Dr. Mack. So, yes, sir, you have a question? Go ahead, take the microphone. Please state your name and then your question.
Yes, my name is Glendon Ewing.
Your name is?
Glendon Ewing. I'd like to know how many town hall meetings have you kept already and what's the feedback so far? And if the feedback is positive, how long will you think this constitutional reform will take?
Okay, so it's two questions. Number one, how many town hall meetings have we had so far? And then the second part of the question is, how long will the constitutional reform process take? So the first question, so we've had, this is the 5th town hall meeting that we've had. We've been in Montego Bay, in St. James. We have been to Mandeville. We've been to Portland. Yesterday we were in St. Elizabeth, and today we're in Westmoreland.
We also did a St. Catherine one with the churches.
Well, that was a public consultation, but in terms of town hall meetings. And then we have Mrs. Lalisa Davis-Mattis to answer the question about how long will the constitutional reform process take.
I don't want to defer to David on that, but remember there are 3 phases, right? So the first phase has to do with the governance framework. Whether or not we are agreed as a people that we no longer want a king of Jamaica. So that's the first thing. And then, if the answer to that is yes, so what are we going to replace that with? So that's the first phase. That's what David spoke to about the need for the referendum, because the Constitution prescribes the process. So there is no discretion on our part or the part of the government of Jamaica to dispense with that process. If the process says you need the matter to go before the parliament, but then it must go to the people, it is the people that decide. In other words, if we do this and it doesn't work, then we keep the king. Right? So when the election is called, when we get there for the referendum, if 1, people don't come out to vote, 2, if people vote to retain the king, then we remain a constitutional monarchy.
In terms of time, sir, we want to go to all the parishes and we want to have town hall meetings right across the nation and consultations. Now, from the point where we have a bill which is prepared, we make our recommendations as a committee. From that point, when a bill is put before Parliament, it's going to require at least 6 months for it to be passed, and then a referendum. So, safely, it's going to take maybe at least a year, in my opinion, for this first phase, at least a year. All right?
Thank you so much for your question. Now, we're going to switch gears back to the presidency. Now, I want to see or hear responses in the audience about terms of office for the president. Now, we're moving to have a president as the head of state of Jamaica for the Republic of Jamaica. In your opinion, in your humble opinion, what would be a suitable time frame for a president to sit in that office? Are we thinking about 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? What are your opinions? Your name, miss, and then you can ask or answer the question.
The name is Stephanie Ricketts.
I'm sorry, we're not hearing you clearly.
The name is Stephanie Ricketts. And it is not about what you just said, but I am looking at the process. And perhaps one of the reasons why we are where we are now, it is the process. I think the process is flawed. I say flawed because think of when we started. Think of when you started. And the way you go about it. Town hall meetings like this. It is the 5th. And how long? Just tell me, could you tell me how long have you been having these town hall meetings?
So the town hall meetings started in April of this year. The Constitutional Reform Committee was established in March of this year. So we started a month afterwards, yes.
And do you know why I say it is flawed? We are looking to change something of over 60 years. Over 60 years. And we, in fact, some years ago we started what we call 2030 vision.
Vision 2030, yes.
Vision 2030. And we realize that even at this point, when we are maybe 6, 7, or 8 years to achieving what Vision 2030 wanted to achieve, we are still a far way from it. Yet, in months, since April, we are trying to look at what to change something which is of over 60 years. The process, I think, in my humble opinion, we're looking at the future. As Mrs. Davis Mattis said earlier, we're looking at the people, those yet to be born. And we are making provision. They are going to say, what were we thinking? Just as we are looking at what 60 years ago the people thought of independence. And here we are. Now, how do we go about it? Are we going to make the same mistake, or are we going to get the people, the youth who we are planning for? Because it's not planning for somebody like me. I'm over 80. Right? And we are the ones. Look at your audience. Look at your audience. It is the generation to come that we're planning for, you know. And we are planning their future. The process can't be this way. We have to look at the young people, get them to understand, not like what was in the civics book, but to understand what we are doing. We get them at another stage to find out whether they understood what was told to them. And if they understand, what do we do with that? How do we go about it? If it is not done, if the process is continuing like this, we will not get what we want to achieve. You will not get what you want to achieve.
Thank you for that. As a committee, we have actually spent quite some time reflecting, Madam, on the process. And the town hall meetings is a part of the process. However, we have acknowledged and we have advocated for public education over an extended period of time, and public education that includes our schools, our young people in particular. There is a member of the committee who is a youth ambassador, so to speak, and he has been engaging a number of our high schools. There have been debates on a number of issues such as that. So we recognize and appreciate that for this to happen, that generation, younger generations will have to come on board, own the process, understand what is happening, and be a part of the whole process. So I'm just saying that we are appreciative of what you are saying, that town hall meetings alone can't do it. Can't do it. But we also think that town halls should be included in the process, in addition. So that is how we are approaching it. And as we said earlier on, we also have consultations. So there are different groups who come to us. I know, for instance, that there is a youth body that wants to come and make presentation to the committee. There are a number of advocacy groups and civic organizations who come and make representation. So it's a several-pronged approach in terms of the process. It's not one size fits all. We are trying to capture as much as we can a wide cross-section of our nation in the process. And it includes significantly public education and public engagement. And that will take some time.
And just to mention also that a number of social media platform has also been erected, and mention will be made of these again, where the minutes of what we're doing are published there, various engagements that we have had with the press, that's also there for you to see. So it's a number of different avenues that we are using to get the information out. And so we're hoping that over time, persons will be able to get a better appreciation of what the process is. We're also looking at getting the Constitution itself in a simplified manner that the ordinary Jamaican will be able to understand, so that they will know what we have now and what we are trying to move towards as we do a revision of our Constitution. So it's a number of things happening all at once. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCarthy. And just to add to the pointers about having the youth involved so that they can understand about the Constitution and the reform process. So the Ministry and the Constitutional Reform Committee has been in partnership with the J Limited, and that is the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment Limited Group, about the Great Constitution Debate. Now, there was a first debate held in May, and that was under the mood, the President in the Jamaican Republic, that involved the UWI UTEC students, and they were debating the executive versus the non-executive president and what that would look like for Jamaica, the benefits and the disadvantages. And then also on the 3rd of August, that is next week, Thursday, there is a part 2 to the Great Constitution Debate, again in partnership with the Jade Limited, that's the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment. And this time, the moot will surround the CCJ versus a Jamaican-based highest court of appeal at the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and it will be streamed online on Facebook and on YouTube. So we are doing different initiatives to involve our youth to make sure that they are understanding at their capacity, whether it's at the primary or prep school level, also the secondary level, because this debate will be with high school debaters, and then also at the tertiary level. I'm sorry? There was a junior debate for the primary and prep schools, and I think the Bull Bay primary school was the winner of that, and they had different zones, different competitions about different aspects of the constitutional reform. So we are engaging the Buff Bay primary school, my apologies. So we are engaging the primary school students as well. Yes, sir. You have a question? Please introduce yourself and then state your question.
Good evening, everybody. Raldin Reynolds, Office of the Member of Parliament, Westmoreland Central.
Could you speak more into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Good evening, Raldin Reynolds, Office of the Member of Parliament for Westmoreland Central. With respect to term limits for President, I would suggest that an upper limit of 10 years be set, and I'll say why. I believe that a decade is more than reasonable time for someone to identify, resonate with, and fix a problem. If after 10 years you cannot fix a problem, it is fair to say that you are not of capacity, and someone else with capacity should be allowed to finish what you can't. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your suggestion. Do we have any remarks from the committee members about the 10-year limit?
One of the things that we have discussed is that the limit should not be such that it is within one term of the parliament, right? So it should straddle it. So it should at least be maybe 7 to 9 years. So 10 years would capture that as well. So we are thinking along the same kind of lines, yes.
Thank you so much, sir, for that question.
Thank you very much. Carlton Wilson again. I was just wondering, listening to the presentations, I'm wondering, if we are talking about the presidency and the change of the constitution, seeing that we will not have a monarch as head of our nation, what implication will this have for the position of prime minister? Because I want to think that our system is a prototype of the British system, which is predicated on the whole matter of the monarch. Will our change of presidency, of constitution, have anything to do with the Prime Minister and its role, his or her role within the context of our Constitution?
The role of the Prime Minister would continue very much as is now, save that, as I indicated earlier, the President would make certain sensitive appointments as it relates to governance. In addition, and the issue of accountability of our government has arisen many, many times in different contexts. We want to look at how is it that we can ensure that the powers that are exercised by our Prime Minister is not of such that he has, as it were, a concentration of power so that he can control the executive, that is the ministers of government, and also control the parliament, which now exists. And so that is one area we are also looking at. But in a general sense, the role of the Prime Minister will continue.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon again.
Good
Still
evening.
Gary. Listening to you, and I'm trying to get an understanding. Are we having a constitutional reform, that we are reforming everything, we are changing everything, or is it that we're only changing from the monarch to presidency? I don't because when I'm here listening for constitution change. That means the land, the crown land now is ours. No more the king.
So apart from the land situation, what else in the Constitution do you think should be changed?
I am here thinking about the changes. Because we are changing from something, and now I'm trying to learn and understand where we are going with this.
Yes.
All right? What I'm getting from this is that we are moving from the monarch to a president. Is it an executive president or a ceremonial president? I don't know.
Can I facilitate the answer to that question? It's an excellent question. It's asked all the time. So we have a constitution that, for the most part, works for us. For the most part, I would say. And as I said before, the constitution that we had in 1962 has also evolved because we made changes to it over time for our benefit. So the question is, do we get rid of everything? So part of the process is looking at what works for us as Jamaicans, because not everything needs to change. For example, we mentioned the whole Bill of Rights that we say people don't even know what rights they have. And even as we have these discussions across the island as we go from place to place, we recognize that we don't necessarily know what our rights are. The Constitution is not a document that you keep in your car or you have it beside your bed. The Constitution is almost like a document that you hear about when you have an issue and people talk about the Constitution. So in terms of the review and the reformation process and Jamaicanizing it, yes, we have to look at issues. And if you look at what happened with the former commissions, because remember, this is not the first constitutional reform committee. And some of the recommendations and the previous ones have already been implemented, like the whole Bill of Rights. So we as a people and as a committee, we are listening to those elements that people want. The issue that you raised about the land, is very significant. So now it's crown land, but if the land is vested in the people, what does that mean? Does it mean that I can now go and set up my house? Because it says the land is for the people? So I'm saying, we have to really think about it. The gentleman at the back, he made a statement. He said, when you talk about the value systems and what you want, one of the comments was, what do we really want to see? So yes, we have a constitutional document, and we can look at the US, we can look at every country in the world, but what do we want as a people? So different rights have emerged. We have indigenous peoples in Jamaica who say we want our rights recognized in a constitution. We have groups in this country who say when you take up the census, we want to be identified as a specific group. Are those matters for the constitution? Are we to consider those matters? What do the people think? So we say to these various groups, come and tell us what you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that every submission in relation to constitutional reform can be accommodated because of the nature of the Constitution and the nature of other laws themselves. But I like your question because you're asking, here is what we were given, right? And as David said before, formulated here, yes. And this is our Constitution today. But is there anything in there that you think is not there or should not be there? What are these new rights that you want that belong in a constitution, as opposed to, okay, these are rights, but let's put it in another law? So it's a very important question. And for me personally, I think that part of the process must be that whilst we will consider what works for us, and that you're not going to throw the baby with the bathwater, that if we have this opportunity today, that is also an opportunity to look at what are those other areas that we think are that important that ought to be a part of the Constitution.
Can I just indicate some other specific areas of changes apart from, moving from a constitutional monarchy? I'd mentioned them in my opening. One proposal is, for example, the entrenchment of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Put that in the Constitution. Another one is term limits for parliamentarians. Should we say that if you are going to serve, you can only serve for X amount of time? Should we have fixed election dates? Should we have impeachment of public officials? People who serve, if they behave a certain way, should there be a mechanism where they are tried and they are removed from that office? Should there be recall elections of parliamentarians? If parliamentarians do certain things, should those who elect them have the right to, as it were, vote that them move from the place, right? Should there be, in our Constitution, a recognition of the diaspora, those who may not even be living here? What role should they play in the governance of our nation? What about the final court of appeal? Is it consistent with being a republic to still go to the Privy Council? It is my view that it's inconsistent for us to have as our final court of appeal the King's Court. Should we therefore look at the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal? These are some of the other important proposals that we need to consider as we look at the whole area of constitutional reform. And a number of those areas have to do with holding our government accountable. One last thing, should we include in our Constitution the entrenchment of the Integrity Commission, which was appointed as a watchdog over our parliamentarians? And should we therefore entrench that so that that watchdog is protected? There's actually one other that came to mind. Should, for example, the issue of how parliamentarians are paid, should that be determined by them, or should there be an independent body that determines that, what the salary should be of parliamentarians? These are issues that we as a people need to say what we think about it and make some recommendations.
Well, Doctor, yes, go ahead.
No, you talk with thing.
Yes, sir.
You talk like what we want to hear. These are what we want to hear, boss.
I was just about to say, I saw a lot of heads being in the affirmative when we spoke about the salaries of parliamentarians. So I see that is a sore point for a lot of persons. Sir, do you have a question? You can come to the microphone.
Sorry to be so frequent.
No, we love the participation.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The question is, in this new dispensation of presidency, would the president we are thinking of, would he possess the authority or the powers to replace, say, a prime minister who is not fulfilling his constitutional role as is seen by the country?
That's a loaded question, right? And I say it's loaded for the following reason. The truth is that a prime minister, in the normal course of things, ought to, in my opinion, be elected by the people. And the people, therefore, should be the ones to remove the prime minister. But the way that we do it may be through the president. You see, that's why I say it's a loaded question. But we have to think it through, how it would work. All right?
And I just want to add to that before you come, right? I mean, another good question. But in working it through, sometimes we have to think cause and effect. So you do this. What is the effect tomorrow or in the next 10 years? Whatever, so I'm of the view, whatever system we devise must work regardless of the person who sits in the seat.
Me again, sorry. Question. Will the president be appointed by the prime minister or be elected one?
You weren't here at the start, right? But that's a big issue, right? Because some folks are saying, we want to elect our president. That's what we are hearing from a number of folks, right? There's another proposal that says that the president ought to be appointed by the prime minister who nominates in consultation with the leader of the opposition, and that the members of both houses would vote for the president and a 2/3 majority. That is on the table for consideration.
And let me also add to that, that depending on what we agree to at the end, there's a cost to all of this, you know. Because you're talking about 2 general elections. So if it is that you have 2 terms and each term is 5 years, at the end of, typically, at the end of every 10 years, you're going to have a general election to choose which party leads the country. Within that time frame, too, you're going to have another general election to choose a president. There's a cost to all of that. So, in other words, whenever we work out the things in our head, that's what I'm saying, let us think of the cause and effect so that we don't have something we say to ourselves, okay, so how is this going to work? And can we really make it work?
Yes, miss. That's why Mrs. Ricketts was correct that we are rushing this thing. Because the time frame, because for me, I would love to vote for my president.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah,
I would love to vote for my president. The time frame that we have from March, now is what? August. And by September, what are we running down? Why in such a haste? Because if a lot of youth them on the road now, they talk about this, then I ask you what you talk about, brother.
So September is not the time frame for us, and I'm speaking now as an independent member of the committee, right? We don't determine the time frame, but a time frame has not yet been determined. And I'm also firmly of the view that this cannot be rushed. We have to take our time, educate our people, have the engagement, and address the issue. Which is why La Letter says, on both sides of the political divide, they have to agree that this process called constitutional reform is up yaso. And we are committed to it, even if it does not happen within the term of our parliament. It must supersede that. That's my view, and I'm expressing it clearly and candidly as I can.
And also, that you can't drag it out too much either. We have been at this thing for too long. We have been at this thing for a very long time without coming. But what I'm saying is that whilst we set timelines, don't drag it out too much.
Okay, I have something, this is the last thing I'm going to say. How we communicate to my younger brothers and sisters, all right, and the whole Jamaica family, and all of we know the Queen's language, and all of we understand some words when I use. You understand? Honestly, we not, I'm going to put it this way, you don't reach you, them, and you don't reach me neither. Because I come here, so, as a layman, I try to understand and get the grip. No, me learn something new, me can go up on the road attack. You see me I deal with, but for no language, nah, reach our youth them. And I make plans, and for me, you know, me I get out too. After some children, when I'm born yet, I'm want to know, so when I leave here, I did my job. So I now just sit down and make nobody right now fool and no fool nothing and give our youth them. And they still has feel the pain what we still have feel. Because we make fool decisions to satisfy ego. You understand? That's what I have to say.
Thank you
So
so
the
much, sir, for your
engagement process will also take into consideration the groups that we're dealing with. So when you're dealing with children, then you'll break it down to their language. Young people, the same thing.
Good evening. My name is Javan Comrie. Dr. Henry, you have made mention that the Office of the Prime Minister will still exist when we have the Office of the President. Can you tell us how will we separate powers of both offices?
I can't answer that specifically now. It is something that we're going to have to sit down and work through. We already have a general model of the Governor General and the Prime Minister, and there are aspects of what the Governor General does now which will be taken over by the President. So we do have some precedent. But we also, as I indicated earlier, are looking at perhaps some other functions for the President, and we need to define those very clearly and separate those out from the powers and function of the Prime Minister. But as I sit here today, we have not clarified that, but we need to clarify that.
Will we still have the same structure of government, or will we move to have our senators be elected?
I love these questions, and I love this kind of conversation, quite frankly, because one of the things that has emerged is that we should elect our senators as well. We should. That is also on the table for consideration. Another thing on the table for consideration is that our parliamentarians or members of parliament should not become ministers of government, because it's two different full-time roles. And that is something that's also on the table, so that we can have a system of governments that works for us, so that our MP truly represents us and not get consumed with representing the party.
Yes, sir, go ahead. Well, yes, miss. Yes, you had a question.
I'm just thinking that all of us here, we're learning. Even me, we're learning. But this learning must be transmitted across. And this is why I speak about the process and the timeline. Because when it stretches across and everybody learns, then everybody will understand. And in understanding, I will make a suggestion also that when we get to that point of selection, of changing from the Governor General and all the bodies that follows, the Costos, whatever name the Costos is going to be called by at that time, because it won't say Costos anymore, and it filtered down, and each one teach one, so that we'll all understand. And during that time, when we are electing or selecting or through the process that is used, all are looked at so as to save. Because I heard Mrs. Davis-Mattis spoke about cost. It carries cost. Everything carries cost. So it is not just selecting whoever we're going to call the Governor General, or replaces the Governor General, and it filters down to the Costos and the JPs or the local government, whatever it is going to be called. But we'll look at having all these running closely so that it costs less to taxpayers.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir, your question?
I would like to ask, if Jamaica become a republic, would this make the country a better place?
So the question is, if Jamaica becomes a republic, will it make Jamaica a better place?
We decide. The question is, if Jamaica become a republic, will it become a better place? My answer is, we decide. Because a republic means government of the people by the people. And if we are going to play the fool with our republic, we will not be a better place. But if we choose to do things right and put systems and structures in place that ensures a better society for ourselves and for our children, we will become a better place.
There you have it. Question answered. We have some statements on YouTube here. I see that Ricardo is stating that the retirement age for parliamentarians should be something considered in the Constitution, in the amendments of the Constitution. C. Fisher states that, how can we have confidence in the Constitution when it was ignored recently by raising the age limit of the DPP and the Auditor General from the age 65 to 70? We have Hakeem saying, no to the Electoral Commission. All adult citizens should be eligible to vote without the need for a voter's ID. A nationality card for other identification card should suffice, and popular votes would be the only ones to count. Ned Christie says, if Jamaica, through constitutional reform, becomes a sovereign nation, why not have our Court of Appeal become the final court of our justice system? Because they believe that we should leave the Privy Council. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Any other matter, any other concern, suggestion, or recommendation for the Constitutional Reform Committee? With that being said, I think we have had some... Sir, are you coming to ask a question? Yes, you are. Okay. Go
Good
ahead.
evening again.
Yes.
With respect to existing conventions and treaties that Jamaica has signed to while we were under the Crown, assuming we become a republic, will there be any ramifications? Will those treaties be nullified? Will we have to renegotiate some of those treaties, etc.? Thank you.
So the answer to that is no, and the reason is that Jamaica would have been a party to these treaties by virtue of its sovereignty. So Jamaica is a sovereign state, and changing to a republic does not change that. But what it is changing the form of government. So those treaty arrangements would remain.
Answer to your question? Yes. Thank you so much, Mrs. Davis-Mattis. We have some more questions online. Will there be an age limit for the president? Has the committee considered an age limit for the president of the republic?
The answer is no, we have not.
Okay, so that is some food for thought for the committee. Verona Williams on YouTube said, ceremonial rules are not for developing countries. Use the cost savings to build reformatory schools for at-risk youth. The whole country will reap the benefits for generations. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No? Any concerns, any matters that they would like to bring to the fore of the committee members? No. Do we have any last words from any one of the committee member on the platform?
I'd just like to say that this is really our business, and we have to treat it as our business. And the whole issue of who are the engagements, now you said look around and who are represented here in terms of the age group. And it really is what you call free business. It's really our business that we really need to find a way to ensure that we engage. And I also want to say that these consultations are being recorded. They're being recorded and will form part of the record of the road to Republic. And therefore, when our children and grandchildren in the future look at the process, they will know what it is that we have done to contribute to their future.
I see we have one final question from an audience member. Please introduce yourself and state your question.
Good night.
Good night.
My name is Jackie Malaho. I basically just want to welcome the team to Westmoreland. And on behalf of all the Westmorlandites, I want to thank you wholeheartedly for coming out to share knowledge with us. Wherever you go, whatever you do, there's going to be a plethora of questions. Some you can answer, some you can't answer, but it should not hinder the process. Change is coming, whether we like it or not. If it's not for a republic, it's going to be for something else. Town hall meeting is just one of the initiatives, and if I may say, it's a very good initiative. So I want to encourage you to continue empowering the people through knowledge, because it is popularly said knowledge is power, but I'm going to put a different twist to it. It is the use of knowledge that really empowers us. So once we leave here, we should all be in better stand to at least understand one segment, one fraction of what is about to happen. And I would want to encourage everybody to be a part of the process. If you have not yet been enumerated, put yourself in a position where you can effect change. And those are just my comments. I thank you.
Thank you so much. And what a way, what a note to end on. Yes, Dr. Mack, you can go ahead.
Right, and I'd just like to say that as a nation, we have reached to the age of maturity. This year we are celebrating our 61st anniversary. And it means, therefore, that it requires a united effort for us as a people to chart our path. We recognize that becoming a republic will also put us in a position where we are able to do some things for ourselves and to become, as I would think, truly independent. It is going to require the effort of everyone. And I often say when we have meetings like these, now that you have been empowered with some information, take this back to your own small groups and share it with them. If it is even 1 or 2 points that you have gathered from the meeting this evening, so that those persons, so if each person had a small group of 10 that they share 1 or 2 points with, it means that many more persons would have been reached with the information we are trying to disseminate. We are Jamaicans, let us stand united. Because if we become divided, then we are not going to achieve our goals.
And with that said, Dr. Henry, do you have any last remarks?
My final remarks would be the following. 1, to thank each of you for coming out and participating in this town hall meeting. Thank you deeply. I'm humbled. Every time I have these meetings, I hear an aspect of things that we need to take on board. And so we just want to assure you that what you have shared with us, we have recorded. We are going to be reflecting on it as a part of the process. And one of the big takeaways from it tonight is it's a process, and we need to be careful about the process and to ensure that the process is inclusive of Jamaicans right across the length and breadth of our country, having regard to language, how we communicate, and how we share with generations, because everybody has to, as it were, come on board for us to move forward as a republic. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry. And I just want to state that the public engagement and public education efforts of the Constitutional Reform Committee does not just stop here at town hall meetings or public consultations with different stakeholder groups. But we're moving into a different phase of our consultation efforts. You will see a more rampant effort on our social media, which is for the ministry's page at MLCA-GOVJM, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also on YouTube. And for the Road to Republic page, which is our campaign for the constitutional reform process, is Road to Republic JA on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter at Road to Republic. You guys can also send your submissions and or proposals that you want to share with the Constitutional Reform Committee to the email address constitutionalreform@mlca.govjm, and you can also visit the website at roadtorepublic.mlca.govjm. There is also a WhatsApp line that you can send your queries or suggestions, recommendations to the committee, and that is at 876-441-9097. Yes. We definitely will take that suggestion, Costos. Thank you so much. I have to acknowledge the Member of Parliament, Mr. Moreland Wilson, who is in the front row. Mr. Moreland Wilson, just make yourselves acknowledge so that the camera can see you. Stand and show your hand. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge Mr. Wilson. He has been here sitting and listening to the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson, for listening. I'm sorry? Member of Parliament Lawrence, please acknowledge yourself. Yes, you're here as well. Yes, you have been here and listening to the conversation. And we apologize for not seeing and acknowledging you earlier, but thank you so much for coming and thank you so much for listening into the conversation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have said all that we have had to say for this evening, and we look forward to engaging with you a little bit more. As Dr. McCarthy said, we bring back at least 1 or 2 points to our respective circle of groups, and to let persons know that we are on this road to Republic. We are going to make it easier and more understandable for persons to understand what this process is about, and we hope that we can get everyone on board. My name is Nastasia McFarlane, and it was a pleasure being your moderator for this evening. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Before we go, we would just like to sing the national anthem just as a closer. So I'm going to ask everyone to stand at attention.
Eternal Father, bless our land. Guard us with thy mighty hand. Keep us free from evil powers. Be our light through countless hours. To our leaders, great defender, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever, Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love. Teach us true respect for all, stir response to duty's call. Strengthen us the weak to cherish. Give us vision lest we perish. Knowledge send us, Heavenly Father. Grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever, Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, Jamaica, Jamaica land we love.
There are refreshments at the back of the room, so please do join us for some refreshments.